Usually, in most stuff, Jordan is pretty yellow level, which is very high. But I think when he talks about romantic relationships, he's at the blue, which is like 3 steps down.
Warning, this podcast is for entertainment only and not intended for medical purposes.
Enter the Freud.
I think everything he said is true. I hate saying this, but I think everything he said is true for like humans that are fairly lowly evolved. That they haven't evolved.
What the hell does that mean?
Maybe Jordan is one of these lowly evolved people. Maybe he hasn't reached, but I don't think so. Maybe he hasn't reached. I sort of think there's a threshold under which everything Jordan says is right. And I think that no one wants to admit that there's different evolutionary levels of humanity because it's a super not PC thing to say.
Why? Why is that not PC? Why is that not? Why can't we just acknowledge that? Hey, consciousness happens in developmental stages, right?
Yeah. I think it's obvious, and that there's some humans who are more highly evolved than other humans, and the reason it's not PC is because it doesn't fit with sort of this like all humans are equal, democratic, intellectually liberal Western worldview. Because from this perspective, all humans are not equal. All humans are equally valuable, but all humans are not equal. There's some humans that are much more highly evolved. The Dalai Lama is way more highly evolved than Jeffrey Dahmer. Like, come on, you know?
Okay.
And I'm arguing relationships should work differently for people at different levels on this evolutionary spectrum. And what Jordan is speaking to fits for most of your average Joes or lower. But I think people who've gotten to the point where they're going to like be responsible, they're going to prioritize taking care of their kids, they're going to be economically responsible, they're going to be responsible citizens. I sort of think those people have graduated up to a higher level, and Jordan never speaks to that higher level. And I think exploring sexuality, exploring different relationships, learning through different relationships, just kind of like exploring a new... And also the people who've graduated, they're also people who can like be respectful in relationships, and they can talk respectfully about sex and consent and pregnancy and STDs and protection. And if you are in that higher level of maturity, what Jordan says about relationships is just kind of fucking childish, honestly.
Wow. Well, but so you're specifically talking about romantic relationships, right? Because if you listen to what Jordan says, not specifically in his bullet points, but if you listen to the context of how he describes male relationships, I think he has done a better job than anyone I've ever heard, right? When he talks about his early formative years in Alberta or wherever the hell he's from, right? Yeah. Like way out in the plains of northern Canada, the stories he tells about how men work out relationships is just it is brilliant, right?
Yep.
It is.
I totally agree. I really love that about what he says. Yep.
Yeah, right. And it's not. He's not really making these points. The ones that get he's almost like a comedian, right? He has a couple bits that hit, and so then he keeps bringing it up. Like, for example, if you're a guy who happens to be in the top of some level of attractiveness or desirability for whatever factors, and then you go and you have multiple relationships early on, he's quoting some research. I don't even know what the hell he's quoting, but it's some research that says, well, then you are likely to be of the dark triad. Another one of his that's another one of his hit punchlines, right? It's just like that makes you narcissistic and sadistic, and you're psychopathic. That's a psychopathic property to go and seek out multiple sex partners, right? Rather than what you and I have mentioned. Obviously, if we talk about our own early childhood experiences in the pursuit of love and happiness, and the fact that you try to have an all-in relationship and the girl just dips. She decides, oh, no, I liked you, but now I have some other thing. I'm moving to another country. Whatever. And so that, these relationships don't last. And so then you go and you're like, all right, now I must go figure out what am I going to do?
Yep.
And and because it is an option that you can date multiple people, right? I was listening to some lady who's gotten pretty popular with the 222 plan, which is like go on a date every 2 weeks, go do something every 2 months, and then take a week-long vacation every 2 years. And I'm like, I don't know. I take like week-long vacations like a lot of times a year. So I've got it wrong, right? I've got it wrong. That model works for somebody, but then once again, who is she talking to? I don't fucking know, right? Back to Jordan and so I just wanted to point out that his obsession with, dudes seeking out lots of relationships makes you a narcissist and a psychopath. He says that repeatedly, and what do you think about that?
And I think that's true of that's true of some guys. And
Thank
people
you.
lower on the totem pole of evolution, that's usually true. And I think people could move up to Jordan's level of evolution, and if they follow his advice, they'll move up to be at his level, and that's good. And now here's my criticism, Jordan, of where I think he needs to move up. And that is, I think romantic relationships have a lot of different needs woven into them, and they're super complicated. But let me simplify into a couple. One, there is this kind of animalistic, ape-like sexual need that I was talking about. And Jordan makes the very good point that should be contained in marriage and a societal structure, which I think is true. That ape-like need kind of is in conflict in all humans with what I'll call an attachment need. So when you're a little boy, you are attached to your mommy, or a baby ape is attached to his mommy. And that need is super powerful. And when you kind of go into middle school and high school and you have to let go of mommy and the umbilical cord cuts, it fucks you up in this really deep, profound emotional way. And that's why you hear all these stories about how high schoolers are all so fucked up, is because...
Why do you like this? You love this concept here.
I just think it's super important and people don't get it. Because I think most people have this super intense emotional attachment need. All humans have it, and that when that umbilical cord gets cut from mommy at some point, it's now maybe the biggest, most difficult problem that a human needs to deal with for the rest of their lives. And how most people deal with it is in high school, they quickly find a new person to plug their umbilical cord back in.
Yeah.
But then for the rest of your life, you're either plugged into another person, or when you break up, it gets ripped out. And the breakup is the emotionally hardest time for a human, right? And so humans then go through the rest of their life either plugging back in, or getting it ripped out and being broken up, or if they're single, they kind of have this lonely single malaise thing. And so the attachment problem now consumes a huge part of human life and human art and poetry and songs. It's a really big deal. And I think Jordan doesn't talk about this conveniently, because Jordan is solving that problem by plugging into his wife, and he's just got his fucking whole head buried into her belly button, because he can't deal with, and so my thought is this higher level of relationship evolution is trying to deal with this attachment thing in new, more mature ways. And I don't have it figured out yet either, but I do think we humans need to evolve and do something other than just this kind of borderline-y all or nothing thing.
Holy shit. How did you figure this out? What started you on this path?
Just watching all of, every fucking client ever struggling with this. And then I myself plugged in and did what you're supposed to do, which is you get married. But then what you discover is this plugged in thing is kind of like an emotional merger that happens between the two partners. And it feels really good when you're coming in. But then it gets kind of stagnant. And then you see married couples just start to take each other for granted and start to get annoyed with each other and blah, blah, blah. And there's just kind of like a common malaise and lack of excitement and lack of vitality and just kind of like stagnance that happens in the stereotypical marriage that Jordan is in. And then inevitably that gets rotten and then people get divorced. And I think there's a lot of theorists, like Esther Perel is the most famous one, that talk about how tricky this thing is. And it's not just as simple as Jordan is prescribing. There's a much trickier negotiation and learning and growing that needs to happen for mature humans.
I think a lot of people then quickly come to the conclusion of, well, you need to select better when you select for mates. They'll go right to that and then put the pressure on the person of, oh, you didn't screen properly somehow, which is totally ridiculous. And then I see like all relationship and marriage experts, quote unquote, will say like, oh, it becomes stagnant and worse, stifling to the human, to each person, as they are unable to actually then maintain their own values and move towards their own actual goals as they mature, right? But then their argument is, oh, well, you don't work on it enough. You didn't go to the couples therapy. You didn't do the things. And I think that is a complete fucking misattunement and basically like a prescription, once again, blaming the people as if they didn't try hard enough. And it's like, what the fuck? This is the most important thing in life. And to say that, oh, yours didn't work out because you didn't try hard enough, like, what a terrible thing to say to people.
Yeah.
What an absurd thing to say. And so, I like, are you mostly agreeing with Jordan? And what you're saying is Jordan is an appropriate level. If we were to say consciousness is in 8 stages or whatever Wilbur has mapped it out to, right? And you'll say that, okay, the bottom is the red level of consciousness, very frequently referred to as the Trumpsters or whatever. Like in our culture, we kind of point to them or the radical leftists. They're all in this super primitive, everyone, it's us against everyone. And then Jordan is somewhere up in the middle where he's talked up, but this is specifically only towards relationships, because as we've indicated, there is some aspects of Jordan where he has gone completely global consciousness, and he is able to talk to a place that is as far as I have seen anyone go.
Yep.
Right, but then when he talks about relationships, boom, he's stuck here in the middle. Is that what you're saying fundamentally?
I totally agree. Yeah, I completely agree. So in spiral dynamics, it's beige is the lowest, then purple, then red, then blue, then orange, then green, then yellow. I think usually in most stuff, Jordan is pretty yellow level, which is very high. But I think when he talks about romantic relationships, he's at the blue, which is like 3 steps down.
Oh, that's so strange. I somehow remembered it as red being the lowest, but that's okay. Like, memories are silly like that.
Well, red's pretty low. Red is sort of like the dictator level of whoever's the most powerful is in charge, and you just have to bow down to that motherfucker.
Oh, so I got it correct. It's just there's a few even lower.
Yep.
Oh, okay. Well, like, what do you think of this kind of like punchline comedian style of just repeatedly saying that men who then are, somehow, if you're divorced, then you're no longer a dad, right? Like he will offhandedly say this, right? Like, oh, in telling stories about his childhood, this is where his biases start to leak through, right? Where he'll be like, yeah, well, all the kids had dads because they weren't divorced yet. Divorce wasn't prevalent back then. And it's like, yeah, dude, Jordan, you're forgetting the fact that there are people like you and I who are divorced, and then we are such committed dads that
I know it's amazing he doesn't address that. It's a big oversight, and maybe we're a small percentage, but we can't be that small percentage, because I know a shitload of people like you and me who are divorced who are super fucking good dads, way better dads than most married dudes.
Yeah. I see that too, and I guess we are in a really weird bubble, I guess. right? But it's the same for even tons of my childhood friends are now divorced, and Satbir's age group, so they're 5 years younger than me, and they're all getting divorced now, kind of collectively. As it's almost like they all hit 40, and then their relationships imploded for whatever reason. I think Sabir is going to continue on for his is working. So but the rest of them are divorced, and so then they are all in this kind of a wait. I got to figure out what to do now, and then I see them. They're super dedicated to their kids, regardless of what's
Jordan
happening.
Peterson and a lot of the red pill people, they love to cite these statistics of like a kid who grows up with married parents does way better, has way less abuse. But then if the biological dad is not around, the little girls get like raped by the new dad, or the kids get abused by the new dad, because if he's not biologically related, the kids are fucked. And okay, yes, that's true of a certain percentage of people. Correct. And maybe it's the majority of people, but
there's no way it's the majority. There's no way.
Well, who knows? But the point is that it's completely ignoring the phenomenon of dads like you and me and all of our friends, and so there's this whole higher evolution wave of people that you can't just ignore what's going on in that phenomenon and what's going on at that evolutionary level. It operates according to completely different laws than what Jordan and the red pill people are talking about.
Well, let's steelman this and take Jordan's perspective, right? He would say, you and me and all of our friends, we are deluded in the fact that we are just hedonistic, going after, we decided, our relationships aren't working out. Hey, we're still attractive, and somehow we end up at the top of the hierarchy. Let's just go get tons of ladies and like fulfill this thing. No, I'm serious, right? If Jordan were here, and he was able to participate in this conversation, I assume he would take that position. He'd be like, "You fucking idiots! Look at you guys! Like, you are the most hyper-educated. You're white men at the top, and so like you get to just like get on apps and just like scroll through ladies, and so shame on you, you fucking Machiavellian creeps, right? Like that would be what he says. What do you have to say to that, good sir?" So you're not actually evolved. You're not hitting a higher level of relationship evolution. In fact, you finally embraced your narcissism, Dave.
I mean, I don't want to say there's no truth to that. It is true that post-divorce, I have like dated and fooled around with a lot of women, and maybe I've deprived other poor guys of getting to have women. Shame. And maybe if I was consigned to just one woman, then all the other guys would just have one woman and everyone would be happier. Dude, it's hard for me to like take that argument seriously. That seems so stupid. And honestly, it sort of seems like it goes against, like one thing I like Jordan, how he argues about, is he really talks about like the psychology and the sociology like of capitalism, and how like societies thrive when everyone is like trying their best. And capitalistic sexuality is sort of like, all right, dudes, why doesn't everyone just go and become the best person you can and then try to get the best person you can? And then weirdly, Jordan's argument is almost more for like relationship sexual communism, where this higher order thing is like, okay, everyone only gets one person. We must share the resources equally. You see that kind of weird paradox?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I do think in my dating of a lot of women, I learn, I grow. The women I'm dating learn and grow. And I sort of think in terms of this higher level of evolution, when you reach the level of evolution where you take care of your kids, you work hard, you're respectful, you're responsible, you talk to people. I sort of think when you reach that level, you should do what I'm doing, which is like explore a lot of relationships. I think there's new learning and growth in new relational experiences.
Well, imagine, I'll go the other way now. I'm going to make an absurdist argument, right? Like, so, okay, you and I are friends, right? And so we're going to say that, okay, that's enough friends. You have some friends, I have some friends. I know some of your friends, you know some of my friends, right? Like, that's enough friends. No more fucking making friends, right? But in this past year, I've made like 4 new dude friends. And I think that's a little bit greedy for my stage of life, right? like I'm taking away guys who they should be friends with some other guys, right? Like now they're part of my crew, and I'm just being, that's greedy.
Yeah, right. So
I'm a narcissistic, Machiavellian sociopath.
Right. When you make the analogy of friends, it does a really good job, I think, of bringing clearly the issue to hand. And the issue has to do with jealousy and like mate guarding. And the idea is that humans' sexual thing is, the jealousy and the mate guarding is so fucking intense that we can't share mates in the same way that we share friends. And that's why we have to do this one-to-one thing. But I kind of want to argue that, like, but maybe we should be working to try to mature and evolve above this fucking primitive jealousy mate guarding thing. Well, and so that romantic relationships can start to resemble friendships more.
Whoa.